Hi, my name is Leonard Finns. I'm 95 years old and I'm a World War II veteran. As a matter of fact, I'm a former first lieutenant in the field artillery and I served in the Pacific, and I'm a decorated veteran. But more importantly at the moment, I'm going to give you a very short script about my life, very, very quickly. I wrote something called the Trump Odyssey. The Trump Odyssey is a series of many, many segments, more than 100 segments, that speak about this fellow, Donald Trump, who is our president, who I knew personally, whose father I knew personally, but I'll get into that in just a few moments. First of all, I was born in the Lower East Side in Manhattan, New York, from immigrant parents. Then moved to Brooklyn, schooled in Brooklyn, and then after that, I went to high school, at the High School of Music and Art, because I started saxophone lessons when I was 8 years old, and I had very good teachers. It was part of the Depression at the time. Well, having graduated from high school, we had a war on. It was called World War II, and we had the 18-year-old draft. And as soon as I got out of high school, I was drafted into the Army. I went down south, did my basic training, but because of my background as a professional musician, I was immediately assigned to produce and direct shows for the Army at the base, which I did for many, many months. After that, I was transferred to the United States Army Band, played saxophone and clarinet for real soldiers. It was a great joy. It was great. But after about a year of that, I decided, how can I ever tell my future wife, who I didn't have at that time, or my children, who of course I didn't have, that I spent the war playing saxophone and clarinet for real soldiers while they're marching on the fields. And here I am playing for officers' dance clubs and things of that kind. I wanted to get into battle. We were at war. It was World War II. And I made application to Officers Candidate School. And I wanted to be in a combat unit. And I made my application to the field artillery. I was accepted. I went to Officers Candidate School in Fort Sill, Oklahoma in 1943. And in the class itself, there were about 100 of us. These guys came from the European battlefronts, from the Pacific battlefronts, and here I was coming from the United States Army Band. I was a PFC, the lowest rated person in that particular class of 100. We had master sergeants, first sergeants, buck sergeants, great soldiers, all right. Out of the 100 who started, only 32 actually made the grade. And how it was that I made it, somehow it was a miracle, but I made the grade. And from a PFC, I was commissioned a second lieutenant in the field artillery and sent immediately overseas to the Pacific Theater, where I was decorated in the Philippines. Okay, now, after the war, I was in service for almost 4 years. I was one of the survivors. When I got home, I was still just a high school graduate. I enrolled under the GI Bill at NYU, got my bachelor's degree, then got my law degree from NYU, and became a lawyer. But I was also a professional musician. I was engaged by Music Corporation of America, the largest theatrical agency in the world. I was booked at television, nightclubs throughout the entire country. I did a lot of concerts, things of that kind, recordings under the stage name of Lenny Forrest. But then after that, I decided I've got to get back to the law. And what I did ultimately, I became a New York State Supreme Court Justice. I also became an author and a trial lawyer. Now, I've had 4 books published, which takes me right to what I'm talking about now, the Trump Odyssey. The Trump Odyssey, with a subtitle, A Real News Bio Scripted in Finzian Single Speak. with all attribution to George Orwell, of course. Let me tell you about the Trump Odyssey. I've known the Trump family. I knew them because they came from Queens, just a few blocks from the courthouse where I had my chambers, as a matter of fact. I knew Fred Trump, the builder. He introduced me to his son, Donald Trump, who I knew, met many times, who was the President of the United States. So I have an insight into the family. With that kind of an insight, I'm 95 years old. There are a lot of stories that I can tell, and I tell them all in what is known as a Trump Odyssey because it's a series of segments, well over 100 segments, that take him from his youth up to the very present. I speak about all of the topical issues of the day. These segments are serious, they're comical, they're nuanced, they're satirical, and they're relevant. But most importantly, they are topical, which takes me to exactly the Trump Odyssey. Let me give you an example, for example. The introduction of the Trump Odyssey. And this is all to a hip-hop beat. Visualize that everything is in rhyme and there's a hip-hop beat going as I'm speaking, and I'm going to do it right now. And this is the introduction to the Trump Odyssey. Listen. The Trump Odyssey, a news expedition, his journey from childhood to the current rendition, created in rhyme, always more to complete, apply each segment to a hip-hop beat. That's introduction, and now the prologue. I'm a World War II vet, age 95, you hear? Got a story to tell, so please lend me your ear. I lived a long life with the usual bumps, but what will now follow is a life that is Trump's. When you read what I wrote, he won't be martyred, so give me your attention and let's get started.